Hello everyone and welcome to my painting demonstration. Today I will be working in acrylics and I'll be painting one of the Scottish lochs just not far from Glencoe. And I'm interested in bringing a little bit more exciting details on the water, on the waves. So I was on a kayak here, so I want to have that feel of being closer to the water. And I also want to bring some of the details of the trees and of the mountains at the back, just a little bit more, maybe bolder and larger in scale as well. Some gorgeous clouds, perhaps not as bright and bold as I would want the sky to be, but it gives me an idea of where to work with some of the skies and how to build up the clouds as well. So an idea for the composition, an idea of what could be done to the view. I want mainly produce kind of the feel of being on the water and looking at the shore. I'm using a violet background, so I mixed some white ochre and violet to mix that color because I want to see some of the darkness and build on the light on top of it. I think it will be quite a lovely earthy color too, to support some of the greens and some of the water as well. Now on my palette, I have some white, ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, crimson, only need tiny bit, but just squeeze quite a bit. It happens, violet and some black. And then I have some emerald green, phthalo blue, and some ultramarine. So I'm going to start sketching with my brush straight away. I'm going to use a little bit of diluted violet, and let's plan the composition. Just going to check that I can see the color. Yeah, that's all good. And let's get started. So I'm going to draw my horizon a little bit lower. The horizon currently is on the photograph is halfway through, and I think that's also by dropping it a little bit lower, I can zoom into the space behind it or above it. I just drop it tiny bit lower, and also it will give me an opportunity to see the water as I'm right there without overly too much similar planar shapes as well. So lower horizon, let's plan my mountain here. I think that might be coming somewhere here. It's quite a wide shape for the peak here. And then it just reduces the size, and there's some woodlands on top of the hills somewhere here, some beautiful walks, and I'm slightly zooming in into what's at the back, into the landscape at the back, and let's plant some of the pine trees here as well. So loads of wild areas and wild animals as well, like the pine martens and like all the badgers and some of the wild birds, which were lovely. Of course, all the otters as well, all in one area as well. Fantastic. Right, I can see a couple of individual pine trees here as well, which I might just plan as some of the darkness is. And then the cottages. Okay, so I can just plan these groups just a little bit off center as it's on my photo. Just want to make that variety. Okay. Some seals as well, especially kayaking, spotting there. Nurseries, mid-May. There's a loads of baby seals about. Okay, so perfect space for them. And might just move one of the hills I was building here. Okay, and perhaps some extra darks of the woods at the back. Okay. I'm going to put a couple of cottages as well, but for now, if I'll just put little hints of them and mainly work with color. I've got part of the cottage hidden by the trees, but seeing a little bit of that white will be lovely after. So just finding an approximate space for them, just an approximate sizes. Okay. Or just a little couple of blocks of white will be enough as well. So just planning them gently. Okay. And then the clouds. And that's quite exciting. They've got quite a nice larger shadows. I quite like this beautiful opening of the side of the cloud where we can see a large white part of the cloud. We've got a narrower base for it. This one is a much wider base for the cloud. Okay, and then it's getting offset by another bordering cloud. Again, a bit of a darkness. I can straight away go with the tiny bit of tone. It's not going to stay as dark as that, but it just gives me an idea of planning of the blues, planning of the other shadows. Okay. Maybe we'll shrink part of that darkness as well. Okay. And then a little bit of planning for the water here as well. So some smaller textures on the water close to the shore. And I think I'm going to have some lovely depths perhaps as well, mirroring the sky. And slightly larger curves to the water, showing that it's right next to us. We are in that water. Okay, I think that's something that will be good. Now this cloud looks a little bit like an octopus shape, so perhaps I'll need to make sure it will not be an octopus when I start painting. Maybe need to turn it to a different type of pattern. Okay, these clouds will come in here at the bottom as well. A smaller scale, curved clouds, curly, lovely, fluffy shapes. Okay, and I think I've got overall layout completed. The paints will just take a moment longer to dry. And I'm gonna start getting my colors out. Right, now I'm gonna start using some larger brushes and get some color out. I'm gonna put my gloves on as well. And let's pick one of my FEB brushes. I'm going to start with painting the sky. So let's bring a little bit of white and phthalo blue. Okay, maybe a tiny bit of emerald green as well. Some of the lighter parts of the sky. Be nice to see some of that lighter blues. Okay, maybe a tiny bit darker. Against the current violet background, it does look very light. But looking at my palette, it's a good well, this is a good medium darkness. So let me just pick up a little corner. That's better. Okay. So I might just find a few areas of possible openings between the clouds. Maybe even painting a little bit more than needs. I can always paint the clouds over. Okay. A little bit similar size shapes here for now, but I know I will be working with grays and warms of the clouds, so it will change. Okay, slightly darker blue corner here. And again, going lighter towards the horizon. Right here. And again, some of the clouds might have quite close to the paler blues, darkness. Might have some closer to the color as well, but for now, again, so those lovely strokes FEB brush gives me might remind us of the shapes of the clouds as well. Okay, just distant against some of the darker trees. Okay, and a little bit of a similar color, but maybe a darker version. I'm going to place on the water. Now, because the reflective surface, we tend to use a slightly darker color, and there will be all sorts of colors in here on the surface of the water, just reflecting light, reflecting the clouds. So a little bit of showing the depths of the water as well. I think I'll have more ultramarines here as well, but if I'll start with, as we don't have a direct kind of mirror reflection, it's more of the light reflection. The water needs to be still to have a mirror reflection. So I'll place part of that light. I can see perhaps some of the light areas, possibly the cloud formations there. Okay, so I might just plan it a little bit more. Looks a little bit plain here as too similar. They might just link a little bit together or possibly connect. Again, it's a good starting point to see the color against some of the dark. Okay, just as initial start, I think that will be all good. And I want to take it out here as well. The width of my strokes is a bit similar so far, but I'm just blocking, and we'll deal with that later. Okay. Now let's bring a little bit of darkness to my clouds and some light to my clouds as well. I'll wash my brush and look for some warmth within the clouds. I'll go for some white, some ochre. I just need a little bit more paint, especially from the white, and small amount of violet. Okay. To make my shadows on the clouds, I need more intensive darkness. And also I will use small amount of ultramarine to neutralize my ochre. Both ochre and violet are warmer colors, so they're just a little bit off, being opposite. The ultramarine is kind of balancing that position of ochre and violet on the color wheel. Okay, so that's quite a dark gray. I'll just place it on the painting and see how it's going to stand out against the sky. Okay, so that's quite light against the sky actually. So let's make it slightly darker. Well, perhaps part of the sky could be slightly lighter as well. If the clouds will start appearing to be too dark. Okay, maybe I'll start it and then compare to overall shape of the shadow of the cloud. Okay, this one as well. I have a little bit more light and a little bit more cooler shadow as well. Most importantly, that silly shape of the octopus is gone. And I want that one back. So just looking for a little bit of light, gently, gently bordering with a shadow. So I'm working with a quite soft acrylic, so the colors blend very easily. So the paints are still quite wet. So I just want to get some of the basics of tone established, and then I can tweak the color, can tweak the shapes, bring a little more extra light. Would you excuse me for a second? Right, so let's bring tiny bit more light into this shape of the cloud. And while the acrylic is soft, it blends very easily. I don't think it's still full extent of that light, but for now, just a little bit of planning. think I might also go for a tiny bit more sunshine and that cloud lit up area with a little bit of ochre. That's better. Okay. And all that area could be built on when it's actually dry, because I think that's quite thick paint now. So it's not going to settle too well. It keeps mixing with all the grays. So let's have a tiny bit more of that. Okay, that's already drying. So okay, that's the reason I've got the gloves on. So I can just get into my paint quite easily. And let's bring some of the lights in the low area. I think I'm gonna bring some of the lower clouds, kind of clouds, which will offset my hills. And then the clouds behind the woods. I might shrink my woods for a moment as I'm painting in this area. And then when I get back to the darker tones, I'll paint the trees over. Again, just a little bit around the mountain. Okay, I'm just looking for blocking some of the light on the clouds. And I can make it slightly different and create some extra shadows there as well. So let's just find some possible shapes and gaps of how much blue is going to remain here. So kind of mingling it. I think this could stay a little bit more into the blues. Also give me quite a dark color for my shadow. I think I can go a little bit lighter. But it was harder to see with all the violet background darkness. I think that could go a tiny bit more lighter altogether. Just checking my shadows. I think they will, I'm using a little bit extra water for the shadows, so I think they will dry a tiny bit more darker than they are now here. Okay. And I also wanted to have slightly darker tone in this part of the sky. A little bit of that violet remaining as little gaps might be quite nice, but we'll see. Okay, I'm straight away mingling a little bit of possible shadows on my clouds or behind them. So from the chaos of block of color, I'm starting slowly defining some spaces. I'm gonna start paying attention to the shapes I'm getting after. put in the blue and the shadows. So if you have a look at this shape, that just looks a bit too precise. So I need to come back with the white and extend it. Okay, this cloud with a little bit more of a shadow. Okay, these are nicely mingling behind light and darker tones. And this is okay as it is. And maybe it will be some extra whites as well. I want to see how some of these areas dry for the larger shadow. Okay, perhaps for now, let's keep it as it is and then define more contrasts as the shapes dry. Right, anything I need to paint close to the hills or trees, so then I can quite easily paint over the area. And also perhaps a little bit of that extra hint of light on the water as well. Probably going to go on on top of some of these blues. I'll dilute my paint a little bit, then it's not going to dry very light. It's more of the hint of the light I want to see. So we'll start changing that distance. Yes, so I'm slowly going to start changing the width of the strokes. And perhaps even, I know it's quite a large brush, but I might even consider putting tiny bit of warmth for the cottages. It's easy to put a fresh white on top of a slightly darker color. So if earlier strokes will look quite bold now, when the color dries and the other colors come around, it will appear slightly darker, but then it's okay. I can still put some fresh white on top. And another cottage is somewhere hidden here. Okay. Might put another, if we've got two big blocks of white, I might put this. Actual, that second cottage was much larger. That's the place where we stayed, and it just stretches and hidden behind the trees. All I'm looking at the painting is more of the third connection. So there might be just a little bit of light, and it might be like those three dots rather than two. It might be an odd numbers, looking a better option as part of the composition. Right, well, I'm on the warm colors. I think I'm going to pick up some oak and some orange and look for possible beach, a little more sandy beach, and open areas. I think so. Tiny bit of crimson to make the orange a little bit more sunlit. It's kind of open, soft part of the soil. Okay, there's also partially seaweed on a sunshine when it dries. It's got that warmth of the color. So using tiny bit of violet to see some of the exposed rock and seaweed. That's why the seals like to come here. And lovely otters hide in there, in that environment. Okay, so I'm not trying to do it all continuous, but a little bit more and stop. And perhaps even a tiny bit of green. Ready for it now. And a little lighter part of that shore, lower area where the water goes with the tide. And the tide is in. So it's all lush green in those areas as well. Tiny bit of violet with the green gives me a more deeper green. It also connects nicely with the oranges. Okay, this brings me close to some of the trees in these areas. Again, just want to probably start with a little bit of blocking of the greens. Let's go for emerald green and some orange. Let's find some of that beautiful early spring greens. More red. Right, I meant to go for green, I went for blue by accident, so let's add a bit more red and add a bit more white, so it's not too dark. So adding some orange or red immediately makes our green a little bit more deeper towards the warmth, but also a little bit more darker. So three-dimensional feel for the trees happens quite quick. Preparing shapes to work with some darkness of the pines. So continue building that up. just a little blocking, and also slowly start taking in where my lighter green will start going higher and lower. Any lighter tones here. Or for some distant light. Pine trees are quite dark, but further back towards the peaks of the mountains, we can see some of the darker violets. Again, if I'll look at the overall silhouette first. And then touch up the highlights of the mountain base. I think we do is a little bit of pink and violet. So then the green will border it, but still kind of the rocky terrain give us that color as well. Also, perhaps the light is changing. Okay. And then the greens will start to take over. So I can go for my back to my ultramarine, emerald green and some crimson. Plain blocking, I want to see a little bit more color. So if I let more ultramarine, might have a little extra blue. Fresher greens for all trees first. Then you can define some of the shadows a bit more, probably ultramarine, some violet. Find a little bit of extra darks. And then I can focus on defining light as well. So the lovely darks will go also below our lighter trees. Okay, perhaps a little bit uniform for the moment. I can vary that. Tiny bit later. My larger pine tree here. Okay, and the lighter trees here as well. A little bit too big. Sponge to take some of that height off. Mhm. Just continue mixing a little bit of extra lighter tone to define my trees a bit more, just to shrink some of them silhouettes. Right, I think it's a bit too large, and perhaps tiny bit too cool look, so tiny bit more warmth there from the orange and green. Just mingling some of the varieties of greens in there. Same time trying to see the whole picture together. Not too much color here, let's just simplify it. Let's bring a bit more greens to the mountains as well. And I think some of this woodland could go slightly higher as well. I do want to see more of them zoomed in surfaces, terrain. That's why it feels, if I go tall on the pine trees, The whole area could be slightly more higher. You need to mix range of greens. Okay, and gently varying these. No, okay, that's better. In between darknesses here as well. Quite small shapes to work with. A bit of in between tones. And that small change of light and dark with a larger brush is not always a quick solution. When this happens, it shows you overall shapes, not just small individual nuances. We see the whole areas, big shapes of light and dark, so that's a nice addition here. So I'm partially looking at the photograph, but I'm also now looking at my painting and making decisions straight away here. Anything else light at the back while I'm working into these greens? Maybe a little bit more light and a slope. Maybe the clouds just partially opened and it's some light letting it through. Okay, that's good. And tiny bit more highlights on my lighter trees. So I'm gonna go for extra yellow and a yellow and orange. And just gently touching up some of the tips here. Comes a little more three-dimensional. Okay, I might need to let this area dry so then it's easier to smudge or to work here. It looks quite a nice little pattern. Gently, gently kind of looking further into the piece, looking into the lit up area far back from the water, a little more further back behind the trees. This one dry. Now the cottages are not so white, it's still quite bright, but not as bold as they initially looked. Still a tiny bit more depth could be shown behind some of the pine trees at the back. A little light on the side remains defining the trees. Another one could be partially softened, but that kind of haze remaining. The opposite, maybe that lighter tone will be the tip of the mountain, tip of the hill here. So it's never continuous block of green going across. There's a change. And again, I'll have to wait for it to dry to see its final look. So drying slightly darker. Okay, that's quite nice. Lost and found light, lost and found light. Nothing to find trees a little bit more now. And now with a smaller brush. Brush my sponge. Ready for anything I might need to work with it. It's a tiny bit more. Blue and violet. Sorry, blue, ultramarine blue, emerald green, and violet. Okay, and let's just touch up some of the greens here. Okay, it's quite dark, so let's pick up a tiny bit of palette color, which will have a tiny bit of white in it. Okay. For my single pine tree. Okay, a little too much information, maybe a little bit too much details. So the more kind of you put details on through the texture, the more defined it will become. Okay, let's start with a little bit of darkness again. Maybe this time more of a shape, more of a wiggle from the brush rather than individual strokes. Okay, that's a bit better. Oh, it's good as well. Looking at the base of the shapes close to the shore, and if they need to be touched or worked into, I think some of the bottom of the shore, the banks could benefit with a little more darkness. It will show its height, it will show the seaweed growing, it will show the unevenness of that surface. Okay, a little bit too similar width, so gonna just soften it. Even if it's there, it might just be less in that volume. Okay. Look at it from a little bit of a distance as well now. So my sky is now dried. So let's pick up a little extra fresh white and make it stronger. So fresh, strong white on my brush. Might put tiny bit of ochre because the surface is dry. I can go very easily into much lighter shapes, but also I can use my sponge. I'll bring my white a little further than I need, and I can sponge it and reduce at the same time, kind of blend it. Okay, so that's one corner of the cloud. Mhm. And let's get some keystrokes. It's quite good just to apply all the light and immediately make those decisions. Does it need to be softened? Does it work? Does it sit well there? Can I just wipe it off? Okay, that might be much smaller than we have above, but something below. And hopefully my trees are dry, so then I can play with that cloud coming out from behind of the hill. I still have a little bit of ochre in my white there. I'm just exaggerating that volume of white. But I think it's benefiting our painting. Okay, so I could always have a grayish layer of the clouds, maybe tiny bit of a highlight, but maybe they're mainly in the shadow behind, under or behind the clouds here above them. Okay, that's will dry more or less pale. But this bold white is still could remain strong here. Tweaking, don't quite like this flat border of the mountains, so perhaps good timing to find that silhouette a little bit more sharper. And find a bit more here as well. Just to show that this cloud got some darkness, I think if I were to find a little gap under its belly, there could be a very bold something behind it. Just need that little bit of extra stretch and a little bit of support of that white. I just want a little more simplicity here. In that, another bold white stroke somewhere here. Look better. Let's see how this one is drying. Again, just tiny bit coming out from that light. And this one is now drying even better. So the white could come on the front as well. Quite liking the center of the sky with the clouds. I think these ones are a little bit too individual. These ones reading a bit more together. These ones even more kind of united by the shadow and broken down by the light. But these ones, I think these ones need something. I think a little bit of coolness from white and ultramarine. Slight hint of oak and violet, so it's not just a fresh ultramarine, but still that ultramarine might be kind of a paler gray, kind of slightly lighter and not just darker gray. Also something that light color could, the white could have a further spread and impact. Okay, just need to be careful. It's not going to look like a sky. Cloud color, cloud darkness color. More bit of lemon. Okay, something exciting happening there. Not quite as it is in the picture now, but just wanted to work for the painting. Few more strokes here, and I'm gonna let it rest, dry, and then review later. Okay, we are looking better. And still these shapes are a bit too similar. Something not quite there yet. We'll give it a little moment to dry. Yeah, this darker. And it doesn't compete with this shape. Okay, that's already looking better. Just clear this out of the sky and just keep this area slightly darker all together. Mhm. Little nuances within the clouds. And a bit patchy here. Okay, this is better. It is much more believable kind of unity of the gray for me. Right, and I can do tiny little white strokes for the cottages. They will start having a shiny side. And then some water. So the light is coming a bit more from this side. So let's put more direct white. White and still dab of ochre. Mainly appears white, but the ochre just gives that little bit of sunshine. Okay, some small strokes. Maybe even a dab of light on the chimney. Maybe a little utility wall. Okay, and it just immediately lightens up. I'm not sure if I still want a little extra light at the back. Maybe a little too much. It's fine with just the two of them as well. I really wanted something else, maybe another stroke. Again, it might be another continuation of the house. Okay, that's looking better. Okay, and the shoreline here could be gently lighter while I'm here doing this. I can add a little more orange, white, and yellow. And overall, it will be much lighter stroke than I had before, just to show that tiny extra sand. Somewhere here, trying to see what the curvature or what the range of light, curvature of the terrain here could be in comparison to the rest of the shore. It's lovely seeing that light appears, disappears, brightens up, and again moves about. Right, and let's have a look at the water. So sure, she's not mucky. And let's wash my larger brush. Yes, and my mud flames could potentially remain as they are, or have a bit more water depth. Maybe the tide is out at the moment. Let's put the tide back in. Okay, some white and some ultramarine. And I might include a small amount of violet and a small amount of black. And just vary some of these blues. I do love the current darknesses. I'll just need to vary. The dark blue will show me like I'm almost in the sea. So might not want to show that. Want to show a lovely deep lake. So that's gray. Blue will be more appropriate. Dropping through some of the highlights. And also adding a tiny bit more indigo by mixing ultramarine and black. That's a nice dark. Show some of the waves. Lovely choppiness. By squeezing the root of my brush, I'm releasing some of the extra white mixing it with the color, and I've got just a smaller change of that blue without too much effort. Okay, these are more diluted blues, so it means they will dry lighter. So persevere going with that appearance of the darkness for now, but I think they will be calmer. Where I'm going over the dark background, initial color background with diluted paint, it will dry darker there. Where I'm going over some of the lighter pre-painted surfaces, the color will dry paler. Okay, so almost finished the blocking now. Slowly start thinking about some of that depth and the shapes of the waves. So let's get more consistent color, maybe a bit more of a medium dark. And let's fill any other not covered surfaces. And let's continue with some of the medium darknesses, kind of link them a bit more together. And then start thinking of some of the little breaking in the surface water with a little splashes of just kind of wind breaking the waves. Like some of these browns still. Full net of light and darks in the distance. So I'm trying to use the tip of my brush and see how it picks up the texture. Because it's a Philbit brush, it's got a little bit of a curvature to the stroke. So it does catch that feel of the wave curvature as well. Okay, I'll see how these ones dry. I want to see more light, just a little more light. I just use a hairdryer to speed that process of light, sorry, of drying, and seeing the correct colors, and then start adding more defining shapes of light and defining nuances of dark, perhaps. Right, let's get the hairdryer out. I've just zoomed in to show you a tiny bit more of the details. I'm going to use a little bit of paler blue now. My palette blue, I think it was mainly ultramarine, with a tiny bit of gray there. So I'm going to go for mainly paler whites just to find that partially not crashing wave, but little sparkle of white on maybe some of the breaking edges. Okay, might just use more of a dry brushing and hold my brush sideways so it will be, okay, that's a little too much of a line. Where I have some of the borders. A little too deep, more shallower connection. Very choppy, so I want to have that choppiness. Just that little dab. Okay, maybe a little too big here. Maybe just a little softer smudge there. Okay, I want to have two similar dots. Okay. Maybe just little splash from my canoe. It might be, sorry, kayak. It might be a little wind creating that very minor sparkle on the surface, and especially if the light is behind me, it's sparkles even more on that outer surface. And a little calm area, little busy area. Sponge dilutes the color, my tissue kind of removes the unwanted messy softness. Right, and for the distance, I want to show some of the fresher whites from the sky, partially reflecting there. Okay, and perhaps a little more bolder whites. Just need to balance it with the shadows. Okay, that doesn't look as good, just looks too big. Look, some of those white fluffy clouds. So maybe just smudging with a sponge and dragging it. Blends it at the same time, contains the shape without over enlarging it. Okay, that's good. That's quite exciting as well. I quite like how that dribble kind of settled in. I wish it could dry exactly as it is, but I think it's well settled at the base here, so that might remain there. It's quite a nice touch of the wash. Thicker paint remains stronger. Almost there. That lovely chalkiness. And I'm thinking of calming down a little bit of the area at the distance. I'll wash my sponge. Maybe just lift the further layers, kind of the closer to the shore. Quite like the calmer corners there. So if I just gently go with a sponge, partially it might lift. I'll dry it straight away so no water is running below. Okay, that looks calmer. And maybe this area as well. Mhm. Mhm. A tiny bit of pale blue to soften that busyness again at the back. I added a small amount of gray. It might be the bank will need to come back darker. I think partially the water as well. It will become less stormy and it gets flatter towards the shore. The kind of the surface is much more shallower close to the shore, so the surface water becomes calmer. Highlights would be lovely when this area dries. So I'll do a tiny bit of a highlight this side. And I think that darker bank will need to come back as well. Yeah, just a tiny bit of drying time. If I'll leave this brush for a moment and touch up my bank. Using some violet and orange. Okay, we definitely got the tide in. Small amount of ultramarine just to make part of the bank extra darker, cooler. Don't know, against that yellowish color, it looks too strong. Maybe the opposite, a small amount of orange and crimson. Yeah, something exciting. Small scale, but it does bring extra light. And let's see if this shape coming lighter. That's one dried darker, but that's quite nice. Okay. And tiny bit back to that highlight. And I think I'm almost done. Not too dark. Sorry, too light. Let's stretch it out. Looking back at my clouds, I think I'm quite happy how they dried. Trees, they're all good. Maybe some of the greens could have tiny bit of highlights. But that's all good. Maybe perhaps a little range of between the mountain peaks, so they're not over similar distance. Something could be tweaked. Quite like that softer depths, so perhaps tiny bit of highlights on some of these yellowish trees. And the peak here. I think I'm quite happy with the rest as it is. So I'm going to stop for tonight. I'm gonna let it dry Just found a little extra darker patch. Let's see, that's better. And I'm going to see it tomorrow, how it appears, and perhaps touch up those couple of things after. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. I hope you had a good time. And if you want to give it a go or do part of the painting, I'd love to see what you do. Thank you very much and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.